Hey everyone, and welcome to the Creative Financing Podcast. I'm Nicole Kamanjian. I'm here with Cody Richard and the host of this show, Jeff Rappaport. This is episode 225, and today we're going to cover part 2 of how to start writing creative financing offers. While listening to this episode, if you guys have questions, please head over to the Creative Financing Podcast Facebook group. If you're not part of the community, just search the Creative Financing Podcast in Facebook and ask to join. There will be a live session on the second Thursday of every month, so please bring your questions. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can ask your questions in the comments below. And lastly, we want to thank you for subscribing, liking, and sharing this podcast with your friends.
Perfect. Thank you. What we're going to do today is we're going to continue on more for the investor that is just starting to get into creative financing, and it can be kind of overwhelming to have a lead and try to figure out where to go with it. And Nicole, that would probably fit more in your realm. And I actually listened back to last episode earlier today, and I put you on the spot, and you were like, and which I know is tough, but as you do this more and more, does it start to make more sense for you?
Yeah, definitely. Especially the repetition, because we always start at the same spot. Like, you like to work backwards, so we got to figure out like the expenses and all that, and then putting the offer together, like where to start, like asking price, so on and so forth.
Well, and today, and Cody, you've had more experience doing this, and now you're doing it on your own, but you for a year, right, you saw all the LOIs, right? And you probably started seeing patterns and particular offers I like, and then every once in a while you'd probably see something like, wait, what's this? This is like new, right? And that's again about building the foundation and having these things that there's certain strategies I like to use more than others, and I feel like they're more straightforward. I think that they work a lot of the time, and they accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish. And then every once in a while, things change, and you have to change as well. And so you can't really make everyone fit into a particular mold. Have you seen that as well in your own business?
Yeah, I feel like for me, the contract for deed or land contracts are just kind of the bread and butter. They work in so many situations. You can tinker with the terms, but that's kind of the one that works most of the time. Like you said, there's some that are more one-off, like seller subordination or subject to or lease option type stuff or simple interest, all those different tools in the toolkit that work less often but still have a lot of good utility.
Well, and lately I've been doing more stuff like you have one payment for this amount of time, and then you have a higher payment or an escalating interest rate. Or maybe it's principal only for a couple of years, and then you get some interest. Different ways to combat the higher prices that we're still seeing. Even though they're starting to loosen, not every seller is certainly on board yet, and even some realtors and brokers aren't on board yet, but we're in that transition period. Did you have something to say, Nicole?
Yeah, I have a question for both of you, actually. How do you decide what you're going to use, like what strategy you're going to use? Because Cody mentioned like contract for deed and listed off a bunch of them. So I'm just curious, how is it just the situation that you're dealing with, and knowing the I guess the different strategies that you could use to help that person out with, or I don't know.
Yeah,
what do you think?
Yeah, for me, I look at kind of two different buckets of information. So one, what the exit strategy is going to be. So if it's something that's really beat up and is going to be more of a rehab project, look for offers around there. Or if it's a buy and hold, I'll structure it based on that, or wholesale, whatever it might be. And then on the other side of it, I look at what the seller is going to need. So how long the term can go, the down payment, interest rate, those kind of things. And I structure based on those two buckets of information. So for example, if it's something where they don't need a lot of money up front, I'm more likely to do a contract for deed type of arrangement, give them a down payment, just structure it pretty normally. But if they need 30% down or a higher down payment, more likely to go with a seller subordination or something along those lines.
And for me, I was very much into contract for deed a couple of years ago, and that was the vast majority of my offers when I worked primarily in Utah and Idaho, because I'd already found attorneys and title companies that understood it and could deal with the closings, and they have some benefits, right? That we don't worry as much about due on sale, and it's an easier sell to the seller. Seller still maintains some control that way. As we've done more and more nationwide, I've gotten away from that, and I rarely offer that anymore. It's not that I wouldn't, but I just don't know all the rules in every market. And rather than try to figure that out, I'd rather just go based on title. And then if that were to come up, when I say go for title, go where the title would transfer. And if that were to come up, then that's now some conversation that I could have with the seller with, what are some of the other alternatives or possibilities? So I know some of the people have asked because they've seen stuff and it was all contract for deed, which was easy when I was just doing Utah and Idaho. But now it changes. It may be bond for deed, it could be agreement for sale, it can be land contract, and every market may have different rules, and then finding someone or people that actually know how to deal with it is a whole nother challenge. So I try to stay away from that now. But if I was selling, that would be a different story. I still like maintaining control, and if I could stay on title as opposed to giving title to my buyer, that would certainly be something I would consider.
So when you're buying, you're structuring a certain offer, but then if you're going to wholesale it, you can structure a different offer.
No. So if I'm wholesaling it, it is whatever I am creating with the seller, because the buyer is buying our contract. And
got it.
If I was again doing it where I felt comfortable, I would do probably contract for deed, because that's going to protect the seller more, and it would be easier if I need to get back involved in some way or another down the road. But because we work in various markets and I don't know all the rules, in some cases there may not be really a major advantage. Like in Texas, you can't do contract for deed. And there's really no reason to, because the foreclosure process is so quick. But it may be worthwhile, like in Michigan, the foreclosure process is probably, I don't know what it is, 4 to 6 months maybe. And then there's a redemption period. And if you were to do contract for deed, there's a forfeiture process that you could probably get the property back in 45 to 60 days. So if I was going to do stuff in Michigan, then I would probably want to do it that way. And but if I'm buying, then I'd rather buy that way, and then I would sell contract for deed or land contract. And then that part won't change much. And you got to know that whenever you use contract for deed or land contract, that even though that there's this judicial way of going about getting the property back quicker, that may not actually be the case if your buyer was to bring this whole thing to court and you end up before a judge. So I would tell you, to me, simpler to just keep it where title transfers, but it does open some doors for some other potential problems. All right, so let's move on, just because I want to get through this in a reasonable amount of time. So I want to continue on from last episode where, hey, where do you go? How do you know what to do when you get a lead, right? How do you even know where to start trying to structure creative finance? And so I did this PowerPoint for our apprentice group a couple of months ago, and I want to point this out. So this is what I do, or our team does, on every lead, right? So we'll look at it on Google Earth. We'll do a street view. We'll get an idea of the area, the street, what it's by, is it up against a major road or commercial property or whatever. Then we run comparables, right, which everyone should be doing. And then if it's a possibility of being a rental, we'll run rent comparables. And those will give us information about where we can go. And you can see the last one down here. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. The last one, and this is what I want to talk about, is determining your potential exit strategies. Okay. So what that means is what based on our business model, and everyone may have a different one. And this is not inclusive. I don't even use all of these, right? And there may be others that you may use. But
Jeff, just for people who are listening and don't have the visuals,
I'll go through them really
okay.
quick. Yeah. So, so first of all, in our business model, we wholesale, we buy, we may do small renovations. We don't really rent, but we could create notes. We may wholesale, we may retail without doing a lot of work. Those are most of our exit strategies, right? With what different kinds of properties we may be dealing with. We don't do short-term rentals. We don't do any assisted living facilities or group homes. And we don't do any novations. Novations being an agreement with the seller to either allow you to kind of put the property on the MLS and or create some kind of partnership with the seller. We don't do those, okay? But I've listed them because you may, okay? So we have rehabbing, we have wholesaling, wholesale being, hey, the property needs some work. You may do little to no work and basically put it right back on the market. Wholesale, we're assigning our contract. Buy and hold, landlord. Sell on terms, which we're either selling to an owner occupant or more than, in some cases, even a landlord or a rehabber in that case, but more often than not, an owner occupant. Short-term rental, novation, and then group home assisted living kind of stuff. Okay.
And just a quick sidebar for reference for viewers, I feel like it's really important to set up your exit strategies or what you're able to do based on the infrastructure of your business. Like I'm very small. I do mainly wholesale and wholesale. I don't have a crew to do rehabbing properties. I'm not as connected with lenders for buy and hold.
Yep.
Whereas Jeff, he has a bit of a larger team. He's got these resources that he's able to pull down properties different ways. So it's really important, instead of just going after all of them, make your company kind of built around what you're looking to do.
Yep. But I would also say that there are subsets within that. So, Cody, you're a wholesaler, but that means that you might wholesale to rehabbers. You may wholesale to owner occupants. You may wholesale to landlords. And those may determine a different offer that would allow you to cater to one of those or multiple of those people, right? So when I say that, it doesn't mean that you do all of them. But as a wholesaler, you may be selling to more than one type of investor.
Definitely.
Okay. Good point. All right. So then I just put here, these are some of the things that we use quickly to identify, what type of what strategy this property may fall within. It's not all inclusive. It doesn't mean that if it's close, then it gives us some ideas of where we want to go. Our cash offer strategy, which is and everyone's got a little different way of figuring this out, but in reality it all comes back to some type of equation that you can use fairly quickly to identify. And ARV times 70% minus repairs equals your maximum allowable offer. And then if you were going to wholesale it, then you've got to minus your wholesale fee. And the only number that really changes here is that 0.70. I would tell you in like Utah and Idaho and our two primary markets, that was more like 0.83, probably more like 0.80 now. Some other markets, it's 0.75. And as things maybe shift to a little more of a buyer's market, it could actually get back to 0.70. So that's really the only thing that changes. If we're wholesaling, we want to make sure we've got enough room in it. And I don't love that it's a percentage necessarily. To me, it has to do more with the area, days on market, and what kind of condition it's in. And then anything that, when we figure out the rents, if it starts to approach that 1% rule, that it could now start to fall into a good kind of cash flowing or rental property. Doesn't guarantee it, but it's just a quick way to know. What I do know is that I can discount properties really quickly using that 1% rule. If I'm trying to buy something for $400,000 and it rents for $2,000 a month, that's more like the 0.5% rule. And I know the further we get away from that, the harder it will be to get any cash flow out of it. All right, so I want to go through a quick example and show what I'm going to do to kind of get rid of some exit strategies, because leads don't fit every strategy. Sometimes you'll find some that are like, oh wow, I could do this, I could do that. Sometimes it's like just that there may be one. And so if you have this mindset going in and you're saying, look, these are all the different strategies I might use, and I can start getting rid of them, then I'm narrowing down my field, then I can start to have a little more direction. So this was a house, actually, Cody actually negotiated this deal back in,
I remember this one.
Yeah, December. And property in Florida. And here are all, it's a 4-bed, 2.5 bath, 2,400 square foot home in an HOA. Really what you need to know is she owed about $290,000. She had a payment of like $2,500 PITI, and she was deferring her payment at the time. So she was in that deferment program. She was asking for $120,000 for the property. So we did our analysis, right? Just like we went through before. We determined that the ARV was probably around 510 to 530, although, hey, Florida, you get penalized for not having a pool. In Utah, you get penalized for having a pool in a lot of cases. So we decided that the value was probably more 505. And we determined that, hey, it needed a garage door, a front door, some windows, some paint, some cleaning, and some landscaping. So not a tremendous amount. It wasn't like all updated, didn't have quartz countertops or anything, but it was in good condition. But it looked really poor because, the yard was done. The garage door was literally hanging by a thread. The front door was like bashed in. And the owner said they wanted to be cashed out. And actually she did not. She said initially she would not entertain terms. Okay. This is why you continue to have a conversation, you dig deeper, right? So if we think that the property is, let's call it 500 just for reasonable, round numbers, would a rehab work? And let's say that, rehabbing would take $15,000-$20,000. So pretty small rehab. But at 500,000, and she's asking for 20, would a rehab work? No, it's super tight. We'd have to get a discount and probably, $40,000-$50,000 discount. Could we wholesale it? Well, we'd have to even get a bigger discount if we were going to wholesale. Could we wholesale it? Yeah, we could, but still it was a little high. The price was on the high end. Okay. There were no rentals allowed in this HOA. So creating long-term terms would only work as if we were going to sell to an owner occupant. Okay. And now that I think about it, that should have been one of the possibilities, but I'll show you why it really couldn't be. The payment was kind of on the higher end. I don't think it was too high, but the seller didn't want to wait on her equity. And could we have done a novation? Maybe, but she was kind of in a rush. So novations typically don't fit. Go ahead.
Can you explain what a novation is, Jeff?
Novation is, so there's that, and I'm not an expert by any means. I've never done one. I don't plan on doing one, but I believe a novation is going to give me the power of attorney to actually put their property on the MLS, even though I'm not a licensed agent. And then there may or may not be some kind of partnership with the seller, right? Like, hey, anything over and above this amount will split, or, without me buying the property, I'll come in and do a little bit of work, and then we'll put it on the MLS and we'll see what we can get. And you get this much and I get that much. I believe that's what it is. So I don't do that, and I'm not going to. Whether you believe, it may be something that lasts forever, or it may be more of a fad. I see it more as a fad. All right. So it's so much easier to negotiate with sellers when you have some direction of what you're trying to accomplish, right? Obviously we always want to get to the lowest price that we can, but that's not even true if we're negotiating terms. Price doesn't really matter as much. The rest of the terms would. But what I'm trying to figure out is what is possible here, right? So we got the price down to 400,000. Okay, but if I've got to borrow hard money now, more than likely I'm going to have to put 10 to 20% down, unless I'm able to find a lender in my local market that's willing, knows me, understands me, and is willing to lend out of state, which is not always easy. Otherwise, I got to go find a lender more either national or in Florida that doesn't know me, and they'll probably want me to put down a significant amount of money, right? Most of them are charging somewhere in the vicinity of 2 points and 12% interest. And so that would cost me, $6,400 in points if I put down 20%, and about $3,200 a month in interest. Well, this is going to add up in a hurry, right? So in 4 months, I will have already been over $19,000 in costs. and I still had to put down a significant amount of money. Okay. So what we decided to do was negotiate the owner finance, subject to, in this case, where we would just pay the seller all of her equity at the time of closing, and she was still in that deferment, so she had no payment that had to be made. Now, it was still getting added on to the back of the loan, so it wasn't like we were getting a freebie, but we didn't have to bring it out of pocket. And then we basically said, hey, we'd pay off the loan at the end of, as soon as we got the property sold, within a few months. Okay, so all of a sudden that made a lot more sense to her. And the only reason that we were able to come to that realization is it was not a rehab, it wasn't a rental, it wasn't going to be a creative finance long term, because we weren't going to get into this house with the kind of terms that we'd want to be able to resell it. We couldn't rent it. And actually, this HOA, you remember this, Cody? The HOA didn't even want me to be able to buy it because I wasn't going to occupy it. So
yeah, that was an ordeal for sure.
Yeah, it was. So, little tip: when you have HOA, make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. But really, it came down to, were we going to rehab this, or we're going to wholesale it, or somewhere like in between, right? Where we might do a little bit of work and still have enough room to put it back on the market and make some money. So that is what we decided to do. And basically, we went through all of our possible scenarios, and this was like the easiest way to buy it. Now, what if you don't have $100,000 or $110,000 lying around? I could partner. I could bring in a lender. I'll probably pay a good amount, but it's on a smaller amount of money than borrowing, $400. And to be honest, I probably would have had to come up with 80 either way. So if you could do it hard money, more than likely you could have done this subject to. And so, do you see how it's giving me some direction on where to go with this? And because otherwise, I'm just sitting with this lead trying to figure out. I know she'll discount to some degree. She said she wouldn't take terms. It wasn't a good enough discount to wholesale or rehab. What do we do from there? So being able to go through your exit strategies and eliminate them kind of gives you some direction on what it is that I'm trying to structure. And in this case, I was trying to structure, I know I got to get the price down, but I don't know how much she's really going to come down. And second, how do I eliminate that big cost of, that was going to be over $19,000 in interest, that, hey, this is already going to be a little bit tight. How do I make sure that doesn't really come back to haunt me?
Yeah, and I think it's eye-opening for me, and it should be eye-opening for our viewers as well, that you've been doing this 20 plus years and still take the time to evaluate your exit strategies rather than just being like, oh, this one doesn't seem to fit anything I'm doing off the top of my head. All right, let's move on. You go through each one and evaluate what it could be.
Well, I could look at this and I could be overwhelmed, right? I know lots of strategies that I can use, but they've got to fit not only with what I'm trying to accomplish. If I'm trying to buy this for myself, does it fit if I want to rent it? Does it fit if I want to sell it on terms? Does it fit if I want to do a lease option? If it doesn't fit, I don't want to make those offers. That's the offer that gets accepted, I promise you. So the goal really is that I need some direction, because otherwise I'm just throwing numbers around. And the goal really is what does this lady need? Well, she wanted as much of the money out of it as possible, and she wanted it fairly quickly. That's what she needed. Now, it's really funny because we didn't know this until later on. The loan was in her husband's name. Her husband had passed away. So there was no reason at all for her to care that we were taking over that existing debt, because it had nothing to do with her. We could have defaulted and it wouldn't have affected her in the least bit. She was getting all of her money up front. That way it did not affect her at all. But we didn't have that information. And all we knew is that she said no to owner finance. As we moved forward and said, look, this is getting super tight with hard money and the amount of money, that's when we decided to ask. And all of a sudden that came out, and now it's like, now it was a no-brainer. It was easy. And once it was explained to her, she understood it as well. And then you can see, based on what we're able to do, that, and we probably saved, let's say, I think this took, if I remember right, maybe 90 days, I would say, total from the time that we bought it to the time that we were done. And we were able to probably save $15,000 on what would be hard money costs when it's all said and done. And we made about, I think, 44,000, something like that. If we had incurred those costs, now we're more at like 28, 29. And now you got to wonder, is that really, if we were going in thinking that that's what we were going to make, that becomes really too tight, in my opinion, to buy. When we had issues to deal with, we had police at the house, we had homeless people living in the house, we had contractors we had to figure out. You've got to always think that, what's going to happen. You see these big numbers, but hey, it's not the big numbers. It's, what's reality. So, but does that make sense? Why, so I want to use those exit strategies to kind of point me in a direction. And, if this was a free and clear property and we could rent the property, how many different kinds of offers could we make, right? Now it's really more important about, do you need all your money right now? Would it make sense to make more money, but make it over time? Now we could look at, could it work as a rental, as, buy and sell on terms, wholesale, retail, whatever the case may be. Now we may have numerous options. Here we had one, in my opinion, at least as far as our business model goes. Any questions?
No, that's super helpful and a really good reminder for me to make sure I look at all exit strategies, because like I said, I have a small team and I try to work quickly and get things processed, but taking that step back to go through each one and say, will this work here? Yes. Okay. Maybe I write an offer that's around this.
Well, and I think that our next episode, which we're going to take this another step further, just because I just talked to one of my coaching students, and this was something that he brought up, and I think that the more I've thought about it, which has only been like an hour, but to me there's only one option here, and maybe two, shorter term, longer term, and I'll show you what I mean by that. But we'll go through and you'll be able to quickly say, all right, I see where we've got to go with this. And if that doesn't fit in your business model, then guess what? You're done. It's time to move on, get to the next lead that's possible, something you can do with, rather than waste time like, can I figure out a way to make any money from this? Nicole, did you have any other questions?
Nope, I think I'm good.
Good. All right. Well, hopefully you found this helpful, and go out and create some terms.